Welcome, everybody, to the special business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, June 27th. Hathan Squalo and Puis Tlakmat, Klasquehomish, Awayomel. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an amended agenda in front of Council, looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, second by Councillor Cryer. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Just quickly, we have two public hearings on the agenda tonight. As well, just as a heads up, item number 4 is we do have to actually go to public hearing on both of these issues again because of a noticing issue in the newspaper. So there will be another set of public hearings on this, so there will be no decision on third reading today. So first up, we have District of Squamish Official and Community Plan Bylaw number 2100, 2009, Amendment Bylaw, Waterfront Landing Sub-Area Plan number 2483, 2016. I just have to read this introductory address for the public hearing. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to Council respecting matters contained in the proposed District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2100, 2009, Amendment Bylaw, Waterfront Landing Sub-Area Plan number 2483, 2016, and District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw number 2200, 2011, Amendment Bylaw, CD 40 Zone number 2484, 2016. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that the remarks be restricted to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following presentations. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the Planning Department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet and shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of members of council or any other person addressing council. I now call on the Planning Department to introduce the bylaws.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. Our planning consultant, Susan Stratus, will give you the brief overview of bylaws.
Well, thank you. Were we going to
Can everybody hear? No. You may have to go up to the podium or hold that microphone because it doesn't sound like, no, not that one.
Don't touch those ones.
Why don't you
This
just
one?
Yeah.
Make yourself useful.
We'll just have to go with it, Kelsey.
Sorry, is that better?
I think you have to speak a little bit closer.
Is that better? Can
Little
everyone
better?
hear?
Just project.
Good evening, everyone. The project that we're looking at today is the Waterfront Landing proposed OCP amendment and zoning amendment bylaws, bylaws 2483 and 2484. So the purpose today is to give everyone an overview of the proposed development and an overview of the bylaws and to look at some new information that has been received since second reading. The lands involved are located at 1500 Highway 99, just over 21 hectares or 53 acres of land. It's a previous industrial site adjacent to Laurelwood Drive, adjacent to the Mamkum Blind Channel, CN Rail, and Highway 99. In the current OCP, the property is designated downtown. It's considered to be part of the downtown colored orange. Oh, sounds very loud here. Okay. Just get myself reorganized here. So the property is designated downtown in the official community plan. The development that is proposed on this property consists of multiple unit residential, commercial, marine, and park uses. The park uses are shown in green, the commercial in red. There is a mix of housing types proposed, including duplex, townhouse, and apartment uses. And there are 900 to 1,000 units proposed. Currently, that is ranging around 947. And there is some flexibility in the types of housing units, and that's why the range has been established rather than a firm number. The development is intended to be low scale near the commercial village, which, let me just get the arrow working here, which is this red area near the Mamquam Blind Channel. The marine uses are in the waterfront area here, and a pedestrian bridge crossing is proposed to link up to Victoria Street. So the lower profile buildings are meant to be near the waterfront, and then as you move away from the waterfront, the buildings get into 3 to 4 stories and up to 6 stories along Laurelwood Drive in the apartment and mixed-use residential commercial properties. The plan also provides for live-work uses within the village area. And I've mentioned the marine uses adjacent to the village. There are 2 major waterfront parks, a large one at the north end of the site. Sorry, I'm having a little technical problem here. The large green area at the north end of the site adjacent to the Mamquam Blind Channel, and at the south end of the site there is an additional park. There we are, got my arrow going, down at the very end, which is also a waterfront park. This table shows the land use statistics in hectares. The mixed density residential is the predominant land use with 9.1 hectares. Roads account for 3.5 hectares. Higher density multiple family is 2.5 hectares. Mixed use commercial, the same, 2.5. Public parks and trails, 2.1 hectares. There is a water area within the legal boundaries of the property, that's 1.8 hectares. And there are 1.7 hectares of internal parks and trails and 0.8 hectares of marine uses. We have been reviewing this project in the planning department with the engineering and other staff departments for most of the past year. One of the beginning documents was the environmental assessment that looked at the conditions on the site, and in particular looked at the contaminated soils that are present on the site from the previous industrial use. So that document has formed the framework of a site alteration permit that has now been issued to help deal with the contaminated soils that are on the site. The environmental assessment also notes there are a few pockets of important habitat, and the idea is to try and retain any valuable habitat as development proceeds. There was a water and sewer system analysis done to determine how this project would be serviced, which will be primarily through extension of existing water and sewer services. A geotechnical report was done to look at the soil conditions for building. A flood hazard assessment was also done to look at the requirement for filling the site and raising it to flood construction level, and to determine the appropriate setbacks for buildings from the Mamquam Blind Channel. The flood assessment has put in place a 15-meter minimum setback requirement, which has been built into the zoning bylaw. A noise and vibration assessment was also done, a requirement of CN Rail, and the assessment came up with a lot of recommendations for setbacks for the buildings, a crash wall, a berm basically adjacent to the rail line. Excuse me, hope that helps. The recommendations of the noise and vibration assessment have also been built into the design guidelines and will be followed through in a legal covenant as well. A marine survey has been done, and the applicants are looking at obtaining federal approvals for the pedestrian bridge crossing that is proposed. A commercial demand analysis was done to determine how much commercial space the site could reasonably accommodate. It originally recommended 35 to 40,000 square feet, and now the applicants are proposing a minimum of 50,000 square feet, which has also been built into the zoning bylaw. A traffic impact assessment was completed, and that looked at the impacts both of this development and other surrounding developments on traffic movements from the highway and into the downtown. The important recommendations of this study were that ultimately a new bridge crossing of the Mamquam Blind Channel for vehicles was also needed. So the Laurelwood Road that is on the edge of this development is planned eventually to have a bridge, but that will be a municipal undertaking because the project itself accounts for less than 20% of the projected demand for that bridge. The development phasing, I'll try again, just give me a second here to get this arrow moving. There we are. Okay, so we've got an arrow. The development begins near Laurelwood Drive, which runs along here, with phase 1, and then it moves toward the waterfront with phase 2. Phase 3 is up at the northern end of the site, and phase 4 is the Marine Village. The pedestrian crossing, however, has been brought forward to phase 2, and the remainder phases 5, 6, and 7 are the longer-term areas of the development. The phasing is very important for the delivery of amenities. In the land development agreement, we will secure the timing for the various amenities based on this phasing plan. And I've mentioned where it starts and the pedestrian bridge in phase 2B. The commercial uses and affordable housing that's proposed will begin in phase 3B, which is up here in this area. Access to the property, right now there's an access via Mill Road that will ultimately be closed. So Clark Drive, which is here and goes up to join the highway, will have an overpass built over the rail corridor, and then Laurelwood Road will be the main corridor with 2 points of access into the development. And ultimately, this is where the bridge is intended to cross. That hasn't been designed, but initiatives are underway to start looking at that more closely. Internally, there are 2 public roads that loop through the development, and the remainder of the roads are strata roads. The servicing for the site, water will connect to the existing municipal system with new mains on Laurelwood and through the site. Sanitary sewer will connect to the existing municipal system downtown. A new force main and lift station will be required of the developers. Stormwater, on-site and off-site upgrades are required, and the district bylaw requires stormwater best management practices be followed. So this table briefly shows the overall amenities and timing, and I'll just briefly run through the important one. Before the project can have any units occupied, the CN rail overpass and Laurelwood Bridge have to be completed, so that's phase 1. The waterfront park and pedestrian bridge are proposed as part of phase 2. In phase 3, the other half of that waterfront park, as well as 55 units of non-market affordable housing, commercial space including daycare, and 50 units of market rental housing are proposed in that third phase. Moving on to phase 4, mixed use, additional commercial space that takes it up to that 50,000 square feet. a waterfront walkway and courtyard in the village area, and a 30-berth public marina will be constructed in Phase 4. In Phase 5, the southern waterfront park and the walkway joining it will be provided. So all of the amenities are planned to be constructed through Phases 1 to 5, and Phases 6 and 7 do not have any additional amenities attached to them. The development under Council's interim community amenity contribution policy generates a total of $7.1 million in CACs, community amenity contributions. They're given credit for 55 non-market rental housing units, so the contribution ends up being $6.8 million in total. That $6.8 million will be spent on facilities on the site. 55 units of affordable housing will be provided, and the other $2.4 million will go to general amenities as constructed facilities, and that will include the construction of the waterfront parks and primarily the pedestrian crossing, which is a big piece of infrastructure. The applicants have provided us with some figures to indicate their actual costs of providing most of this infrastructure. So the $4.4 million of contribution toward non-market affordable housing, the actual cost of providing that is $14.2 million. And I won't read through the rest of these, but the general amenities that are provided that we've already mentioned, the CAC formula requires a payment of $2.4 million, but the actual cost of providing those are $15.9 million. So although the CAC contribution is $6.8 million under Council's policy, the actual cost of these facilities and services is roughly $30 million. So moving on to the policy framework, we've mentioned that the OCP designation is downtown in the OCP, and that is proposed to stay. There is a sub-area plan in place that was adopted in 2007 with a previous development proposal, and that did not proceed. The sub-area plan from 2007 did not fit this development very well, so we are rescinding that plan and replacing it with a new sub-area plan as part of the amendment bylaw. Development Permit Area 10 is already in place as part of that sub-area plan, but we have revised the DPA 10 guidelines as part of the new sub-area plan. So the development, as I've mentioned, is in the flood hazard area, and the zoning, the CD40 zone applies to the site, which was adopted in 2009 relative to the previous proposal. And there is now a new CD40 zone to reflect the land uses and densities we've just described. So the two bylaws, 2483 is the waterfront landing sub-area plan, and 2484 is the new CD40 zone that we're having the hearing on tonight. The application came in last August, just in background, and from October through to April, we've been going through a technical review, referrals to outside agencies, and quite a few design changes have been taking place through various council and committee reviews. The bylaws were both given first reading on May 2nd of this year and second reading on June 6th as amended. There were a number of amendments based on council input at first reading. So bylaw 2483, the sub-area plan, provides a vision for the neighborhood, land use policies for residential, commercial, parks, environment, and habitat. It also contains infrastructure policies to govern the transportation and site servicing and flood protection, and the phasing of the project is also a schedule to the sub-area plan. And I've mentioned the land use plan, I think we had this slide up at the beginning, again, has primarily residential with 2 significant commercial areas, 2 main public parks, marine uses on the shoreline. Schedule B to the sub-area plan is a parks and pathway plan that includes both the 2 major waterfront parks but also an internal trail network. There is a trail that goes around the perimeter of the site. Part of it will be in a boardwalk form through the commercial village, but it provides a complete circle route through the site, and there are internal linkages allowing people in all the various neighborhoods to get down to the water. The servicing plans for the site include active transportation routes on the major roadways with sidewalks, separated bike paths, and multi-use trails on the smaller internal trails. The sub-area plan bylaw includes a number of schedules related to the streets, water, sanitary sewer, drainage, and the phasing. And I haven't shown those, they are in the sub-area plan. The new Development Permit Area 10 guidelines deal with general design and site planning principles, residential and mixed-use guidelines, special guidelines for the Marine Village, which is meant to be kind of the feature, the focal point of the neighborhood. And we've also got new guidelines for the Mamquam Blind Channel, aiming at Green Shores principles and keeping that shoreline as natural as possible. Moving on to the CD40 zone, the current zoning is going to remain in place. The CD40 zone will continue to apply to most of the site. For the two major public park areas, we're proposing in this new bylaw to rezone those to P3 to reflect their public park use. And on the shoreline where the marina is proposed, the Mamquam Blind Channel is currently zoned Industrial 3. So we are rezoning that section to come into the CD40 zone so that the marina use can be regulated as part of the waterfront landing zoning. The residential zones allow for higher density apartments, including assisted living. The mixed density residential, which is the lighter yellow color, allows for townhouse, 2-unit dwellings, and apartment dwellings. There are a limited number of 2-unit dwellings permitted. The intent here is to try and achieve a fairly high level of density being part of the downtown, and no single-unit dwellings are permitted in the zoning. Within the apartment uses, there is a minimum number of accessible and adaptable units required. The CD40 residential zones also permit home occupations and childcare residential, as do most of your other existing zones. In the commercial areas, there's a fairly broad range of commercial uses, which include live-work. There are 3 areas, as I've mentioned before, 3 areas, including a small one down near the park, that allow for live-work, artisan uses, arts and culture, assembly uses, assisted living, business and professional offices, childcare facility, restaurant, retail, and personal service. So there's actually quite a wide range both of commercial and public type of uses in your assembly, under your assembly definition. Okay, since second reading, some new information has come in. The applicants have proposed to commit to providing daycare, a minimum of 2,000 square feet of commercial space in the first commercial building on Laurelwood. It will be done in partnership with an established daycare provider. They've increased the affordable non-market housing from 50 to 55 units. They are also proposing to providing market rental, which is in a building along Laurelwood that abuts up against the park near the Mamquam Blind Channel. The safe routes to school was raised as an issue, and the applicants are proposing a partnership with the school district, likely in the form of a small bus, to take people to school, and that has not been decided yet, but they're still working on that. They've also noted that the berm and retaining wall that they have to construct will help reduce the access to the rail corridor there. The housing mix has been a point of discussion. The apartments now comprise the majority of housing units, And they have provided information on the agenda to show the housing design and variety that they're proposing. This will be established at development permit. It's not a rezoning issue, but images have been provided to show the proposal. The pedestrian bridge timing was reconsidered to see if they could bring it forward sooner than phase 2. It was originally in phase 4, and they have reiterated that for safety reasons, they think it can only be done in phase 2, so that is staying the same. And these are just some of the design images. I won't spend too much time on these, but they have provided images for you of what both the townhouses, duplex, and apartment live-work units might look like. And these will come forward to you in more detail at development permit stage. Referral responses. We sent out referrals prior to the bylaws being prepared in October, an early referral process. We sent them out again in May with the actual bylaws. The responses from CN Rail came through in the early referral, which was mainly the requirement for the noise mitigation. The Ministry of Transportation in the early referral expressed a lot of concern regarding the capacity of the Cleveland intersection and the inadequacy of that as a primary access point to downtown. They have more recently provided support for the bylaws conditional on the district developing a firm timeline and design concept and funding model for the Pemberton Bridge within a year. So they have supported the bylaws and have agreed to sign off on them, but they have other approvals that need to be given, primarily related to the access at Clark Drive, and they want to see progress on the Pemberton Bridge within a year. BC Transit supported the application in the early referral and noted that it was consistent with their current transit plans. The second referral with the bylaws was a bit more strongly worded. They said they need both pieces of major infrastructure, the Clark Drive overpass and the Pemberton Bridge, in order to get buses in and out of Waterfront Landing easily and provide the level of service that they want to give to this area, mainly with the connection through to downtown over the new bridge. So I won't read this, I think just in the interest of time. I've provided in the council report a summary of the items that will be in the land development agreement, which I've already mentioned in this presentation. All of the commitments to amenities and cash contributions, including the daycare spaces, will be in the land development agreement. One thing that I haven't mentioned is the shoreline design and the park design, which will come forward with each phase of development. So those will be done at development permit stage, but the commitment to do those will be contained in the land development agreement. And again, the major infrastructure will also be secured in the land development agreement. So the recommendations for tonight are that, as was mentioned in the opening remarks, due to an error in notification, the recommendation is that a second public hearing be held on July 11th for the two bylaws.
What time?
At 6 p.m., July 11th, 2017, at the Squamish Senior Center. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. I'll just go to council quickly to see if there's any questions for clarification purposes. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. A question, the space that's been set aside for childcare, does that include indoor and outdoor space?
That hasn't been determined. I think that 2,000 square feet, don't have the slide in front of me, is the indoor component it's within a commercial building that's going to be allocated, so the outdoor space will have to be looked at as part of the design. Okay. There is a park across from the building where this is proposed, so they're aware of the need for outdoor space.
Great, thank you. Just a second question. In the bylaw 2484, in section 7, it talks about shared vehicle parking.
Yes.
And we haven't really talked about that, but it says it's linked to where shared vehicle parking is proposed. And I'm wondering if you can just tell me where it's proposed.
It hasn't been proposed anywhere specific yet. The bylaw is written, maybe that's not the best way to write it, but it might have, we could have said if shared vehicle parking is proposed. We've put that option in the zoning bylaw for people to reduce their parking standards if they bring shared vehicles into the site. We use the City of Vancouver as a model, so the way that reads, it should possibly say if shared vehicles are proposed. The applicants have indicated interest in doing this. That's why it's in the bylaw, but we haven't got anything specific. Again, that will be looked at development permit stage.
Can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
Thanks for, I think the wording there is actually important because we don't have it proposed yet. And the other thing too is that we may want to think about linking it to phasing, possibly, because until the bus routes are in and the pedestrian bridge is in, we don't have a walkable neighborhood. I'm very supportive of what you have in section 7, but we need to be thinking about when cars are less important and people can move about the community.
Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the assisted living is included in the commercial space or it's on top of the 50,000 foot employment land.
Assisted living is not proposed at this point. It's a permitted use in the zoning, and it's permitted both in the multifamily areas and in the commercial. So if somebody wants to come forward with an assisted living facility, it's allowed. That's as far as it goes at this point. It's permitted.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing I was wondering, is there space set aside for storage outside of the apartments? I think that for outdoor gear storage, is there any land set aside for boat storage, for paddleboard storage, for all the amenities that people are going to bring up and use, park in their garage?
We haven't got down to that level of detail. Again, that's something that would come up at DP stage.
Okay, and yeah, I share the concerns of Councillor Elliott regarding the transportation. I think it's really important to include that in phase 1, that they actually have a contracted agreement with a provider, as opposed to just leaving it up to saying that they will allow a car share. They need to bring up a provider and have that in the contract. And that's,
I can come back to
yeah,
you.
come back.
And just a friendly reminder to council that this is for questions for clarification purposes. This is a public hearing, so try to keep our opinions to ourselves. Councillor Kent.
I know the Pemberton Bridge is a fairly significant piece to this development, and I noticed that you said that the MOTI is expecting some funding models to come back as to how we may complete that bridge. Do we have anything preliminarily at this point about how we may fund that?
I'll direct this to
We're running out of mic.
There are a couple of options. One, we can discuss this with MOTI. If it's helping them solve their problems, they may come to the table with some or part of it. The other option is a district-wide project, is whether or not it should be included in our development cost charge bylaw.
Thanks.
However, just for clarification, it's not currently in our DCC bylaw?
No, it is not. It would need to be
We need
amended.
to amend our DCC bylaw to include it. Thank you. Councillor Chappelle.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the commercial space again. It's in the 3rd and 4th. I'm just wondering why that was chosen to be in the 3rd and 4th. I feel about being able to walk to your amenities, having some commercial space and some businesses open when you're building housing.
through the chair. There needs to be a certain body of people living there before the commercial is viable. They can't put the commercial in first. There really does need to be a certain number of people living there. So phase 3, I think once you get into phase 3, you're looking at 100, 150 units built. So I think anything sooner than that, it just simply wouldn't be viable.
So the daycare space is outside of the 50,000,
It's part of it
but it's built in the first phase.
in phase 3. The first commercial, it's the
So
commitment that
that's
they made
included.
is to provide the daycare space as part of the first commercial building.
Thank you.
Any other questions for clarification purposes from council? Let's see any. I have a list of 5 people here. I will first call on the proponent or designate of the proponent to come and speak to the bylaws if they so choose. Don't see anybody. So first on my list is Jeff Levine. Please come up to the podium and state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Hi, my name's Jeff Levine. I live at 1589 Eagle Run Drive, Brackenville. I have to say off the hop, I'm representing myself, but I also own a business in town. And I've also worked for the proponent as a consultant. So I just wanted to let you guys know. I do want to talk about the need for higher density housing in the downtown core. As a business owner, we are having a very hard time attracting employees in the middle ground of the employment cycle, just because there's no high density, or there's no affordable, I shouldn't say affordable housing, but there's no houses that younger people can afford. Unfortunately, with the housing prices in Squamish, how they're just going up in value, seems every day, it's pricing these newcomers to Squamish or the long-term locals in Squamish out of town, and what we need to do is increase density in areas of Squamish that are close to within the downtown core. This area itself is a former industrial site. I can't think of a better area to develop as opposed to going into existing neighborhoods or existing forests or natural areas. Instead of protruding into those areas and changing the look and the feel of those areas, which has caused quite some big concerns in Squamish in the past, this is an industrial area that has been essentially vacant for a number of years, and there's no current use of it. There's no public access, so it's not going to be displacing anybody. I think it goes a long way with the strategy of the district of Squamish, make it our downtown core walkable. I know as parking issues keep creeping up in downtown Squamish. If you have a large community that's so close to our downtown, I think it'll do a lot to create more of a attraction to our downtown, just make it look more lively with a large development right across, literally a stone's throw away from the downtown core. It'll help all the business owners in the downtown core. Still at this day, if you walk downtown at, in the evenings, it's still pretty desolate. I see Squamish with some of the creep of the amenities, restaurants going north of Squamish. I think this development will go a long way to helping move people down to our downtown core, which, I've heard many times, how can we develop our downtown core? What can we do to really make our downtown? Well, this is a great opportunity. So I think it's a great project, and I've got a unique position. So I did work with BOZA, I have to let you know that. I came to them because as an adventure company owner, we couldn't do kayak tours in our Manicouagan Blind Channel. It was absolutely disgusting. There was oil slicks happening every day. We had hundreds of creosote pilings in there. I actually went to the owners of the property, the BOZA, and I told them how bad it was. And quite immediately, after talking to them, they took it to task. And I see BOZA, the property, the entire company has been just remarkable in doing whatever it takes to clean up our downtown Manicouagan Blind Channel. I know it's been something that's been going on for years in this town. I don't know how much money the district of Squamish has spent in staff time and trying to get rid of some of these derelict boats that were just polluting our downtown waterway, as well as all the creosote pilings. And I just saw BOZA Properties as it was absolutely anything they could do to clean up the downtown. It turned into a very big project, and for the most part, we created some community memorandums of understanding and community projects with the District of Squamish and several community organizations. And we did something together. We cleaned up the Manapum Line Channel that without it, it never would have been done for any number of years. We took out hundreds of pilings and got rid of a lot of derelict boats, helped. There's a couple individuals that were pretty vulnerable populations, vulnerable people, and we got the help they needed. And as a developer, I just really saw how much they actually cared for Squamish, and this was even before anything, any development, any type of reading. I've seen a lot of developers where they promise to do things and they, after their development is done, but to get it as a leading thing before anything's done, spending literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in cleaning up the channel well outside of their own property boundaries, but actually going much further. And look at our downtown waterfront now. Look at our Manapum Line Channel. It's actually something that we should be celebrating. So, thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, everyone has 5 minutes to speak. You can come back and speak again if your point hasn't been made. Just want to let you know, but we try to keep people as tight and succinct as possible. Next up is Jack Cooley, and then on deck is Hans Montenegro.
Greetings, Jack Cooley, 38225 3rd, Suite 109. I'm a Squamish Streamkeeper co-chair. Everyone should realize that creosote is about 90% fatal to herring roe. And herring deposit their roe in the Manapum Line Channel. Now, originally, many years ago, there were 3 of us, myself, Neil Plum of the District of Squamish, and the late Chris Tenaburi of the Squamish Harbor Authority. And the 3 of us together could only manage to get enough money to pull out about 40 pilings. That would have been about it. It cost about $1,000 to pull up 1 piling, so well, that's all the money we had, we could raise. But fortunately, Boza Properties jumped in, and with their money, we were able to pull up more than 400 pilings, creosoted pilings, which cleaned up the channel considerably. And also, they got rid of some derelict vessels, some boats that were owned by Steen Larson, and a great big barge that, well, it ended up sinking in the Manapum Line Channel, and then it was pulled out and taken care of. Anyway, that whole business of cleaning up the Manapum Line Channel, that was thanks to Boza Properties. That's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Hans Montenegro, and on deck, Stan Matrachuk.
Good evening. My name is Hans Montenegro. I live in Marina State. I have 2 concerns. Is about the how many level will have the commercial and how many level will have the residential part. I think that, just like a suggestion, I will not like to see a huge building with more than 3 levels on the in front of my window. Or in general, when you're in downtown, all the buildings are relatively low. So to keep the same structure, I will not like to see a huge building with 5 levels or 3 levels and 1 underground parking or something like that. So I think that also the visual obstruction should be considered. Other part is, I imagine that the commercial development that is used on the road that probably will become an access from the highway is also with that intention, that is the access from the highway, then it will hire a lot of new cars coming through the town from that access, which now is a car road without too much traffic. That will change also my quality of life on that aspect. And the other element is I'm wondering if creating more residential spaces will really increase the economy in Squamish. That is more, in my opinion, the real problem. Instead of creating more residential, we have already a lot of residential development in downtown, and I know that maybe the hypothesis is that creating more residential will attract more employers, that I don't know how they will maybe just to work and keep building something in construction. But what I'm saying is maybe to see a little bit more focus on the commercial and the economical impact in the downtown. That would be something more interesting than just create another village. Let's have something with cinema, yeah, the childcare could be interesting, but also something that will help more like to give jobs to the people that is coming here. The demographic in Squamish is changing. It was more familiar. You have parents and you have children. Now I see that there are like many younger professionals like me coming to town. We buy apartment, we buy things, but also jobs are important. And I know that I'm not the only one. I have many other professional friends that are also looking for jobs. It's not about the money, it's not about the houses, it's about the jobs. So how much is that a new project will help really with jobs, that is not just giving something to go to work in a market store or something like that. Will be interesting to see that. And in my direct impact, I will just like be concerned about how high is the level of the apartment. I would like that it's still keeping a little bit like natural. We are watching the chief. I would like that keep a little bit that beautiful aspect that is really like the sport national capital. We don't want to become another big city. I think that's what is very beautiful in Squamish, in my opinion. That would be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stan Matuszek and John Jervis is on deck, and then that's the end of my list. So if you do want to speak at the public hearing, just put your hand up and I'll acknowledge you.
My name is Stan Matuszek. I live at 39754 Government Road, Unit 3. I have been on the former chair of the Arts Council, I've been on the former chair of the BIA. I currently work as a sales manager for the House on Brewing Company. I'm up and down the highway 5 days a week. I see the community leave, I see them come home. I'm also a current boat owner, so I'm in the Blind Channel every day, keeping this thing floating. But I've also seen the dramatic changes that this company has introduced to the area. The Stream Keepers are very active in the community. It's amazing to see them involved. I've helped them down on our dock. The changes that have occurred from the pilings being pulled out and the derelict vessels being removed is quite dramatic. There's herring everywhere, there's seals everywhere. We have schools of herring come in, we see seabirds come in and chasing bait balls. And I can also speak to the issue of they're very proactive within the community. I'm in New West, I'm in Port Moody. I see not just sort of a developer that is available for the community, but someone that's setting standards. And I've just seen this just by being a layman and being everywhere within different parts of the Lower Mainland. And I would applaud all of their efforts because I think that the town is ready for this. I am 35. I don't own a home. I'm very actively involved in the arts community, and I really believe that something like this development can actually be very proactive for all of us to introduce people to the community and also to celebrate the people that have already been here. It is an old post-industrial site, and I think that something like this could be very advantageous for the long-term vision of Squamish.
Thank you very much. John Jervis, and please put your hand up if you're interested in speaking at this public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Heinzman and Council. John Jervis, 2319 The Boulevard, Garibaldi Islands. I'm just here to speak briefly on process here. After 13 years of watching applications come through process in this town and attending several meetings, I just have to say that following this one from the beginning, I've seen some really great work and some really good outreach in the community from both the developer and the staff. I think everyone should be praised for bringing this to a point where we have some really great suite of amenities, the bridge, even the daycare, which is, you know, not something we would have been talking about 5 years ago. These are all great things, and I just want to say that I see this as a win-win in the community, and I just wanted to bring that up to you guys that hopefully we can put this out to the rest of the development community, show them how it's done and how to be a great developer, or at least show what a great developer is in reaching out, accommodating the community, and bringing this through process in a pretty timely way compared to some of the other things that have come through. So I just want to say thanks very much and give some praise where it's due on all sides. So.
Okay, Mr. Jervis. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, please come up and state your name and street address, and if you represent yourself, a business, or an organization.
Hi, my name is Chris Morell. I live in the Highlands at 2662 Rummenegg. And I agree about both other people's opinions on both. They've been around a long time. They're a pretty well-known contractor. However, my comments are on the original proposed design that I saw at another public meeting here some time ago. And I thought it could have been done a lot better, and perhaps it will be. I hope so. What I saw was a kind of a boring development with some really good amenities like the bridge, and a couple of bridges actually, an alternate entrance into Squamish. And that was all good, but the buildings looked boring. They were just kind of like rows of cookie cutter boxes. I think that could be changed to something that was more interesting. The other thing, there was no, or not enough public space. So you've got several hundred people are going to live there. What are they going to do at night with their kids? Hopefully they're young people with kids, like a lot of the rest of Squamish. What are they going to do at night? There's no really inviting spaces for them to go and collect and be together. No school playground there, that sort of thing. So I'd like to see something done a bit better with the design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, please come up, state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business, or an organization.
George Devoki, 1460 Pemberton. Years ago, we seen the picture of bridge next to the railway one, and there was taking the petition. Most of the businesses, including Hall Marina and Pemberton Avenue, they were against. There is also on east side, another side of the tracks, the businesses like muffler shop, there is automotive shop, there is also the logging trucks. The Pemberton Avenue is already busy as it is. And so just a month ago, so I thought I saw the picture of new bridge on the south side of that property. So I think most people, at least in Marina States and Pemberton, they would agree with me that they do not want another bridge next to railway one. And otherwise, project looks good. I agree with somebody else, those buildings that we saw, they are like cookie cutters. They need to improve on that. And that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I don't see any hands, but if I could just go to staff for some clarification on some of the items that the public brought up. I'm wondering, there were some questions about height. I'm wondering if you could just go over the height issues and where it's proposed. And I think it was specifically related to where Marina Estates is, but could you just go over where the height aspects of the project are proposed?
Yes, it might be easier if I just pull up a map. Give me a second here. I think I can zoom in on this. Give me a second here.
Maybe you could turn the light down just for a second. Is that possible? You see that? Thank you.
So just to orient everyone, this is Laurelwood. This is Laurelwood running along
We're going to
here.
put a laser pointer in the next budget.
I know. I'm sure they have them at the dollar store. This is Laurelwood, and here's the Mamquam Blind Channel, and this is the Marine Village. So the idea is to have the lowest profile buildings here in the Marine Village, right against the water. The buildings will probably be 2 stories here where the bridge lands to keep a village scale. They may go up to 4 stories as you move further down into the apartments. The area across from Marina Estates is basically park. I think that's one thing to keep in mind. When you get into the townhouse area, which is the light yellow, these will be up to 3 stories, and I think most townhouses in Squamish come in at 3 stories. As you move back toward the Laurelwood area, both with the mixed commercial apartment buildings and the outright apartment buildings along the bluff and along Laurelwood, those again will go up to 6 stories. So the general pattern is low at the Marine Village, going higher as you move back, and then the highest buildings of 6 stories right along the edge of Laurelwood.
Thank you. Wondering if you could also speak a little bit to the public spaces that are there, and perhaps put it in a ratio context or a percentage context with the site?
I've got that in the staff report. I'll just look up the number. Thank you. On a percentage basis, 10%, roughly 9.8%, 10% is public parks and trails, and there is another 1.7 hectares of internal parks and trails that are included with the strata lot, so I can't express that as a percentage, but I think when we looked at this before, it's getting up into the 15 to 17% range for the site overall. And I'll just pull up another map to go back to that. This map that shows the parks and pathways, unfortunately the colors don't come through too well. The major public parks at both ends are part of it, but and again, it's the scale of the drawing doesn't show very well, but each of these neighborhoods has strata parks that are a reasonable size. These are large enough to have local playgrounds. These are places where you'd be able to go and play after work with your kids. These are all connected by trails, and the lower part, we haven't done any park design yet. That's again to come at the DP stage, but the lower part of this first northern park where it broadens out, there is room for small playing fields, and definitely it's on our mind to make sure there are active places to play within the parks. What doesn't show on this map is each strata parcel as well has a requirement for open space on their parcel, and that's in addition to these light green parks and the trails. So we're very cognizant of the need for, I think there's a lot of young people with families in the planning staff, and that's definitely something we're looking for at the DP stage, is to be able to go out and walk your dog and play. The trail connections are a big part of what you will do. I think Amble Path might serve as an example here, where you've got this entire internal trail network linking all of these parks together.
Thank you. And I hope that's clear for people. So all this sort of light beige are actually strata parks that are technically open to the public, correct?
Yes, as part of the land development agreement, we'll be seeking a covenant to make sure that all strata parks and trails are also publicly accessible. And the other component of the open space is, again, I didn't bring the pictures. I was told to keep it short, so I don't have pictures. But the Marine Village itself, I'm still not getting the...
There you go. Oop, you went all the way over.
The Marine Village itself is full of boardwalks, places to sit. It's not a very dense area with a couple of commercial lots where the bridge comes across. It's actually fairly low density, and the concept there is to have a lot of public spaces with benches, places to sit, go to the restaurant, get your ice cream cone, and then the entire waterfront is connected by trails. You can walk along the waterfront from one park to another, stop at the Marine Village, and again, the larger park will have some active play spaces in it.
Thank you. There was also, there was mention of a petition against the bridge at Pemberton. I personally have never seen a petition of that kind, so I'm not sure how old it is, but I just wanted to I have never seen a petition on the bridge at Pemberton. But on that, we did just do a truck study, and certainly the potential for a bridge at Pemberton has been around in several iterations. So I'm just wondering, maybe staff can clarify sort of the evolution of the Pemberton Bridge and how it may, and particularly how the MOTI conditions relate to the bridge.
Okay, I'll just speak briefly to the petition. I know that it would have been early this year or late last year. We did get a lot of similar letters with respect to land use, but I don't ever recollect a bridge being part of those discussions. With respect to the MOTI, I'll perhaps let Mr. Maurer speak to that issue.
Yes, so...
Do you mind just introducing yourself? Thank you.
Yes, Dave Merrill, Director of Major Projects at the District of Squamish. With respect to the bridge and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure communications, as Susan mentioned earlier, the bridge is not part of this development. However, from a district regional traffic planning exercise, it is identified through the truck study as well as through the traffic assessment for this site, which considered the broader range of development, including the oceanfront, downtown development, and other nearby developments. The bridge is identified as a necessary connection. The Ministry of Transportation expressed some concern over the timing of the delivery of that bridge, with their original referral response suggesting that they would like that brought up to the beginning of the project phasing, which again is a district initiative to do. So subsequent meetings with the Ministry of Transportation identified that we basically said that the district is looking to move on that bridge and get it into the DCC bylaw or investigate other potential funding options to bring it forward. And the ministry was satisfied with that response. And we have a 1-year, basically, window to provide a plan for sort of concept for the bridge, funding models, and some other details.
Thank you. And just within the truck study, it did outline other options, but I believe my recollection is correct. It said that the Pemberton option was the most viable financially, feasibility-wise.
That's right. And it should be noted that as part of this development, the intersection improvements at Clark Drive, the rail overpass coming down to Laurelwood, and then Laurelwood built to an arterial standard, is all being undertaken at the cost of the developer. So as part of that connection and the truck route connection, the developer is, as part of this development, providing a lot of that infrastructure up front. So.
Thank you. Those were only the questions that I heard from the community that...
Just on the bridge.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just on the bridge, I thought I heard you say Minister of Transport may come to the table and help build that bridge. Did I hear you say that?
I don't believe I said that.
Well, because the intersection at Cleveland's getting so cluttered up, and that's their intersection.
As part of the recent letter response we got just a few days ago from the ministry, suggested that in the plan that that they're asking us to provide them for the delivery of the bridge, that we provide potential funding models. So we, as the district, will look at options.
Make sure there's a 25% grant from the government in that option.
I'm sure there's options of it.
Is all the commercial zones C4, or is there a specific zoning for the commercial?
The zoning for the commercial is a new zone that we put together in within the CD40 zone. There are, I think, 5 distinct kind of sub-areas, one of which is commercial. So it's a custom zone for waterfront landing. It's not the C4 zone.
Thank you. I'll go quickly back to the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask for a second time. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? And I'll ask for a third time. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? There being no further speakers, I will declare this public hearing closed. Although we will be having a second public hearing on this issue, so council can still receive information. So just want to make that clear, but there will be a sort of part 2 of this public hearing on July 11th, 6 p.m. at the Senior Center. Thank you very much, everybody. Moving on to, maybe we'll just take a 3-minute break. Sorry. Kelsey told me not to hit my gavel, so I have to do it. Thank you, everybody. We are back in the special meeting, and we are on item 3.2, which is a public hearing for District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2011 amendment bylaw 41601, Brennan Road, number 2376, 2015. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to council respecting matters contained in the proposed District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw 41601, Brennan Road, number 2376, 2015. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that remarks be restricted to the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following presentations. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the Planning Department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet and shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of members of council or any other person addressing council. I now call on the planning department to introduce the bylaws.
Thanks, Mayor Heitzman. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. My name is Asia Philp, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. Tonight, I'm presenting information on the rezoning application for 41601 Brennan Road prior to the public hearing. The proposed zoning amendment bylaw 2376 presents a request to rezone the lands from rural residential 2 to residential 1, that's RS1, to allow for a single-family residential development with a rural residential remainder lot to retain the existing home that's on the property. Zoning amendment bylaw 2376 was given first and second readings at the May 2nd council meeting, and subject to the public hearing, conditions for adoption at that time included that conditional densification area conditions be met, a land development agreement to secure the community amenity contribution and off-site water requirements, and finally, a no-build covenant that would remain in place until the portion of the dike that protects the subject property meets standard diking requirements. The proposed development is located in Brackendale at the north end of Brennan Road, adjacent to Judd Slough. The lot is approximately 14.2 acres, and approximately 10 acres is proposed to be rezoned to allow the single-family residential development, with 4-acre rural residential remainder where the existing home is located, and that's highlighted in green on this map. The lot layout plan is shown here. If the rezoning is successful, up to 35 single-family residential lots could potentially be developed through the subdivision process. The applicant has offered to meet the district's interim community amenity contribution policy, which sets a target of $10,000 per single detached lot rezoning from low-density rural to residential. The community amenity contribution would be provided prior to the rezoning adoption. The total amount of community amenity will be calculated based on the lot yield of the subdivision plan, which has received a preliminary layout approval from the district's approving officer. The community amenity contribution is proposed as 75%, the allocation is proposed as 75% to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund and 25% to the General Amenities Reserve Fund. Notice of the public hearing for the rezoning was advertised in the Squamish Chief on June 15th and 22nd. An error was made in the June 15th ad, and this was corrected for the June 22nd edition. 2 additional advertisements were run in the June 21st and 22nd editions of the Vancouver Sun. Notice of the public hearing was mailed and delivered to all neighbors within 100 meters of the subject property, and these properties are highlighted on the map on the screen. This first notice did not include the time of the public hearing. Therefore, a second notice, which included the 6 p.m. start time, was then mailed out and hand-delivered to the neighborhood. No comments have been received in relation to the public hearing notification. 6 comments were previously received prior to the bylaw receiving first and second readings. And just before we start the public hearing, staff's recommendation, due to the procedural errors in the public hearing notification, is that a second public hearing also be held at the Senior Center, and again, that's Tuesday, July 11th at 6 p.m.
Thank you very much. I'll go to council quickly for questions for clarification purposes. Council Pryor?
Oh, thank you. On the clause there that says no building shall happen until the dike is substantially, could you just clarify that a little bit for me, please?
Yeah, Mayor Heitzman, through you. The condition is actually that the district's able to upgrade the dike, so that would be retaining either access or a stat right-of-way along the top of the dike to do the improvements. It's not actually doing the dike improvements. So we need access to it.
Council, any other questions for clarification purposes? Don't see any. I'll Councillor Elliott.
Certainly, at earlier readings, I asked about higher density housing and was wondering if there's anything preventing a higher density being offered in this land. I understand there's flood issues and floodway issues that we need to consider, but it seems to me this could tolerate a little bit higher density. I'm just wondering if there's any technical reasons or subdivision reasons that we cannot see a higher density.
Mayor Heinzman, through you, I believe the applicant brought up at the previous meeting that there was potentially some issues with trying to strata subdivide, so that you couldn't strata a bare land strata, which is being proposed. And I believe staff clarified that you could do a subdivision to carve off fee simple parcels of land, and that was actually an available option. And then since that time, there's been no further discussion with staff on a different form or type of housing.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Houses are allowed to have suites and carriage houses if that works out?
Correct, so the RS1 zoning permits either a secondary suite or a coach house, and of course they'd have to meet the flood construction levels, which would probably mean there wouldn't be basement or even first level available. It would have to be second level and above.
Councillor Chappelle?
Thank you. On that point, we had been looking at allowing secondary suites and coach houses. How close is that to completion they're coming forward in?
I can't speak to that. Gary, do you have a timeline?
No, we don't have a specific timeline, but it's not related to this application.
I'm wondering if I could pose a question to Mr. Buxton. As the approving officer, if we got more mixed density within this development, would the approving officer consider not having a strata road if we could actually achieve mixed density housing within the development?
Yes, there is no specific prohibition. I'm open to looking at options. This is what we're dealing with.
Thank you. I see no further hands from council. If the proponents in the audience would like to come up and state your name and street address, please.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman, and good evening, council. My name is Cameron Chalmers of Cameron Chalmers Consultant, and I'm representing the proponent at 41601, I believe, Brennan Road. I just want to quickly run you through how we've got to the point we're at now and where we anticipate this going. So the owner has owned the property for some time. It's been many years, and probably 12 or 15 years ago, the owner did look at a development proposal on this site, took it through a public information meeting, and at that point found himself on that side of the table as a councillor and then subsequently the mayor, and didn't proceed at that time. But a lot was learned through that process about what the community's tolerances and aspirations were for that area. Following the lead of the official community plan about infilling neighborhoods, and particularly doing so in a manner that's consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, that's kind of the macro structure of the current OCP. It also looks at infill in certain areas of higher densities, and the growth management strategy tends to direct those towards the downtown. That's the policy framework that was put in place. There is in the official community plan, of course, reference to mixing housing types, but in my interpretation, that applied at a community scale more so than a site-specific scale. So fast forward to this application, the owner did meet with the neighbors in the area during the initial phases of the application and did come to the conclusion, and residing on the site himself, that a single detached subdivision was something that did a few things. First, it was consistent with the neighborhood. And it's of note that the application is for an RS1 zone, not the RS2, which is predominant in that area of Brackendale. So it's a single detached versus duplex, and that's by design. The intent was to look at a single family neighborhood. The other thing that came out as a result of the more recent application is looking at minimizing the impact on the neighborhood with things like traffic, flood hazard, and other things. And what the single detached, or this RS1 zone, would enable us to do is the plan that you saw is a preliminary plan. There's a likelihood that it might be modified in response to the flood modeling, which I'll speak to in a second, and some other considerations. But one of the things that I think became really apparent as well is that this is a housing type that is not happening in this community much anymore. A mix of housing types at the scale contemplated in the OCP, in my opinion, is one that at a community scale, you look at a broad range of housing types so that you can meet all housing needs. And as a professional planner, single detached housing, sometimes this is considered taboo, but I don't think that's the case here. Because in this community, there's very few large sites that can handle a new single family neighborhood on flat land, particularly at the conventional lot size of 7,427 square feet or whatever it is. So, taking all of those things into consideration, the owner did decide to proceed with the single detached subdivision. The application was made some time ago because the district was just initiating the flood hazard management work, which again is innovative work, it's important work, but it did result in a bit of a delay and some reconsideration about different options. And at times, in our negotiations and discussions with staff, there was talk about how multiple family form could be more malleable in terms of condensing the buildings, allowing more room for flow paths. We believe that we can meet all the flow path requirements that will come as a result of the modeling exercise in a single detached neighborhood. When we came to first reading, we did hear council's concerns and notions of looking at mixing housing types on the site, and that was looked at. I know that the meetings were convened. Several individuals met with the owner at the time, and the challenge we run into there is that in order to get this project, which is a horizontal land development, it's the servicing and sale of land. That's a very, very different beast than building vertical development or building buildings. So the option the owner was really left with is it possible to create viable sites that could be subdivided off, and the strata issue is manageable, that's negotiable, that's easy to get around. But the question is, could multiple family sites be created on this property, which would be viable? So that means that they could be sold to a vertical developer who would be attracted to them to build them. And the thing that I think we're running up against is the site isn't very big. By the time you net out the hydro lines and the roads, it's running at about 9 acres. And if you were to take a site to market for townhouses, it's going to be really difficult to sell one where somebody would have to pay market for the site and then do 6 or 12 or 14 townhomes. If the entire site was looked at as townhomes, that's probably a viable site. But the biggest issue that I think we've run up against in this is an understanding of the neighborhood. The owner's lived there for some time, he's owned the property for some time. And getting to a level of density where that mixed housing type would make sense, it would introduce new challenges into the neighborhood. And I would take the position that the district's official community plan, if we were to come forward with a pure multifamily project, for example, would not support such. It's not on a transit route, it's not close to schools. There's a whole host of issues and reasons why if this were to come forward to you as a multifamily project exclusively, it probably wouldn't have cut the policy review. So for those reasons, the decision has been made to continue with the RS1 zoning. Do you think it's a marketable use? Do you think it's a type and form of development that is necessary in a balanced housing stock and is not one that we see happening? There is a proliferation of multifamily forms, and trust me, I fully support that as an individual, but it doesn't have to come at the exclusion of other traditional forms of housing, which is what this site would offer. So where we're at now is we are asking you to consider, after this public hearing and considering third reading, there's still a lot of things that need to be resolved. We have not yet received a preliminary layout approval, but at that next stage, we'll start refining things like the site layout, and we're also required under the conditions that you've seen to do the flood hazard modeling exercise. And I think staff has used the term, we're new at this, we're kind of guinea pigs in this. We don't know exactly how sensitive that is, what the tolerances will be, but certainly we're willing to go through that exercise and see what comes out the other end. And if something comes out that doesn't work, then we'll probably come back to you looking for something different. But in all likelihood, we think with slight modifications, we'll be able to get the model to work. So that will protect against flooding. Things like traffic, again, this would be the lowest density form of housing that can happen on this type of infill site, single detached homes. 35 units generates traffic that generally isn't considered even palpable. It's not typically, in most places, a trigger for things like a traffic management study. Stormwater will be a requirement of the PLA that we'll have to address in detail. So again, the district's policies around the retaining and dispersing the amount of stormwater, pre and post development, all of those standards will be met, so there shouldn't be appreciable off-site impacts for drainage. In some cases, these types of sites, in my experience, the drainage regime becomes better. So really we think that this is the softest, easiest way to provide infill in a site that's supportable under the official community plan with the most minimal impact on the neighborhood in a form that is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. and having looked at other alternatives. So through that, we're confident that there shouldn't be any technical ramifications on surrounding lands. We believe that the site will be something that could be developed and could be marketed with relative ease. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
That was my timer, so good job. Thank you. I have 2 people on the list.
I want to ask a question.
But we can do that later.
Okay.
Just hold your questions and we'll go through them. First up is Michael Hutchison.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Michael Hutchison, 37989 Government, Cleveland Avenue, sorry. I'd like to speak really only about one issue on this development, and that's around the geotechnical report, which I read today for the first time. The geotechnical report was done by Mr. Freely, who worked for Curwood Liddell and BGC over the past 12 years. As you're aware, my partners, the Squamish Nation, and I, over the past 12 years, have expended an extraordinary amount of money studying the Chikai fan. It is the most studied fan on Earth, at least in Canada. And there is a lot of information out there. Many of our documents are mentioned and referenced in his report, but none of them with our permission. We were never consulted. And although we're not unreasonable people, and we haven't got anything to hide, there is a problem with that. There's a few things missing in this geotechnical report that I think Council should be aware of. Having some experience with providing geotechnical reports now over the past 10 years, group risk was never considered in this report. There are 2 types of risk when measuring the ALAR. One is individual risk, and the other is group risk. This report assumes that there's about 140 people in this development, and they are the only 140 people on the fan. It never measures group risk. So it is not giving you a clear picture within the ALAR. Secondly, this report was never peer reviewed. You may be aware, and you can see within our reports were reviewed constantly by a panel of 4 experts. We had 16 PhD geotechnical scientists review our reports, peer review our reports, as well as BGC's 6 or 8 of their own geotechnical scientists review. This report has not received a single peer review. When we build the dike along the Manquan Blind Channel, we are required to get that peer reviewed. This has not been peer reviewed. One of the things, and really the main reason I'm speaking tonight, is that most of the information around what should happen on this site is pulled off a model run, which is a computer run of what would happen in a certain set of circumstances around a debris flow. And it is one that we've agreed to allow the district to put on their website, and that's where the information has come from. But this is only a single specific event. And it is actually an event that, when we ran the model, we wanted to see the effect on the highway and the land on the east side of Brackendale Park. So that's the model the district has a copy of, and that's the model that was used for this report. There are many other models, and that particular model is referred to by the term avulsion, meaning where does the debris flow come out of the riverbed, and therefore where does it point, where is it aimed. And there are 3 main possibilities with the Chikai. One is straight down into the Chikai Reserve, IR11. The second is at the highway, that the bridge pushes the debris flow. But by far the most likely event is called the dogleg event. And that is the event that's after the bridge, where the river doglegs. And that event is not the model used here. But we have done that model, we have run that model, because that event aims the debris right at Weywackum Reserve. And so I want to be clear, as the owner of the information that was used to prepare this report, that if you are using an unrelated model to create safe housing on the Chikai fan, I don't want to be responsible. Because I clearly know they've got the wrong model and you are being misinformed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kristen Gawley.
Gully. I live at 41588 Brennan Road. And first, I'd just like to commend you on the development because I do think it is consistent with the neighborhood. I have some questions, but I guess you maybe answer those after. 2 years ago at the Chikai Public Information Meeting, we were told that there's a moratorium on density in Brackendale. And I specifically asked if that had to do with a piece of property adjacent to me. And staff at the time that were at that meeting said yes. So I don't understand if there's a moratorium on density, why you're now considering letting somebody build there. So maybe somebody can answer that. Stormwater, which you guys did kind of talk about, but I'd really be interested to know more about that because from what I can see, it's supposed to go into the existing ditches, which are not ditches. It's grass. We park our cars there. They're inadequate and they're not maintained by the district. And we already have issues with cooling water and sinkholes, and that has since happened since Greg has been altering the site. I'm wondering also about the flood construction level, if kind of a bit touches on what Mr. Hutchinson just said, but if people that will be building there have to build to flood construction level, does that not just transfer the risk onto the people that are existing there right now? That's a question. And I wanted a bit of clarification on the proposed trail, the community amenity that's supposed to run on the eastern side of the property, north and south. A, I was wondering how people are supposed to access it. B, where it goes out. And I think that's about it. Just I wasn't really sure how that trail was supposed to work. So those are just all my kind of questions that I was hoping maybe there could be some clarification on. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, please come up, state your name and street address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Hello, my name is Martin Fitchell. I'm at 1140 Laramie Road, and I'm as an individual. I like the proposal. It's probably the best proposal out there. Just a little concerned about the council's take. I read the official community plan and districts where we want to go in the future, and densification is one thing, but this is not the spot to do it in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Hutchinson's report about the Chikai fan, you're in a geological hazard area. Putting more people, even in single-family homes there, is problematic. At the best of times, I've been there long enough. I do remember flooding. I do remember our basements being knee-deep in water. Ms. Gully alluded to that. What are we going to do with the storm water? So that's a geological or geotechnical issue that has to be dealt with. There is no bus service nearby. There's no shopping nearby. The only school there, Brackendale, is not nearby and at capacity. So it's not an ideal spot for higher densification. I understand that it will be developed, but to do it more than what's proposed, I think would be unfortunate.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, come up, state your name, street address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Greg Gardner, 41601 Brennan Road, one of the two owners with my wife, Lila Godry, who's present. And mostly I just wanted to respond to Mr. Hutchinson's comments. Tonight was the first night I heard that he had concerns about the propriety of the geotech report prepared by Mr. Freely. I understand Mr. Hutchinson shared with me that he has a dispute with him based on past employment about ownership of that information. I wasn't aware of it, and it's obviously a dispute I would prefer to stay out of, and I think there's another forum for that. So with respect to Mr. Hutchinson's comments about the accuracy of the report, I'm a little troubled by those because Mr. Hutchinson is not a professional and certainly not qualified to speak to that, and certainly not at the level of Mr. Freely. And I'm not going to comment on them other than to say that Mr. Freely did contact staff. It was in direct meetings with Mr. Rolston. I don't believe there's any mention of a peer review. I would be very surprised if there were a need for a peer review for a development of this size, definitely. So I believe that Mr. Freely was in direct communication with staff and provided the information that was requested. And the only other comment I'll make is that the result of that report was that the limiting factor here was the flood hazard. The debris flow hazard was met in excess by the fact that the buildings were going to have to be raised to meet the flood construction level. So I'm not sure the flood hazard is even apparent or relevant to the discussion here as a result of the information that I've seen. Again, I'm not an expert. Ms. Colley raised all the very good questions that need to be answered if they haven't in the past, and we will endeavor to do that. As council and staff are certainly well aware, for example, the stormwater drainage is not leaving the site other than eventually, if it has to, as an overflow to the Judd Slough. It's not flowing further down Brennan Road, and more information can be provided. So there are a number of questions there that I think can be answered, and there is another public hearing, so we will endeavor to do that in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, please come on up and state your name and street address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Hi, my name is Michelle Nada Frappier, and I live at 41553 Brennan Road. As a couple of my neighbors have mentioned, the size of this development, the density that is being proposed, is, in my opinion, quite reasonable. If it were a higher density, like some council members have asked about, I don't think that most of the neighborhood would be in agreement to have the developer go forward with it. I am a mother of 2 young children. I also take care of a few other children in the neighborhood, and we have a lot of small kids who we really enjoy having a open community where our kids can run across the street to visit each other, play, and play in the neighborhood if the other kids are out and about. And we've generally felt pretty safe with that, but I do have to say that when the initial servicing or road construction was going in, when the owner was building his own place, I think there were a couple of times where I went down and actually talked to some dump truck drivers and such, because the traffic speed going down that road is very different when there's trades coming through than when there's the actual owners in the neighborhood. So my big concern, because I'm at the corner of Brennan and Laramie, would be some sort of traffic calming, whether we can have a stop sign before Laramie so that traffic has to stop before they hit the gravel, because they just fly by my place and it's quite concerning. It hasn't been as bad lately because there is no development going on, but when Greg's place was being built, as I said, I did go down and talk to a few people in machines to kind of tell them to keep the tradespeople a little slower. So yeah, that would be my major concern, would be the speed of traffic. I think with 35 additional houses, I don't think that the long-term issue of traffic increase is that much of a problem for the neighborhood, but just during the construction phase is what I'm concerned about, because obviously that phase lasts many years. Yeah, that's it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask for a second time, is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? We'll get questions after it. I'll ask for a third time. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? I don't see any. There was a number of questions raised, and maybe I'll quickly go through them, and if councillors have additional questions, we'll go to that. I'm wondering if, Mr. Buxton, can you speak to the, what would be a tipping point for a peer review of this type? And maybe I'll just go through the list of questions with regard to the geotechnical. What would be a tipping point for peer review on, when do we ask for peer review on a geotechnical report like this? There was a comment about individual risk versus group risk, and that group risk hadn't been considered within the geotechnical, and at what point do we, or do we insist on group risk being part of it, or at what point do we? Mr. Gardner indicated that, or somebody indicated, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, that it was mostly the flood hazard that was being considered under the geotechnical report and not the debris flow from, potential debris flow from the Chikai fan. Is that something that needs to be analyzed on this site? Is the Chikai piece of it part of that? And then the modeling that was used, if the Chikai is meant to be or needs to be part of the geotechnical analysis of the site, do we insist on specific modeling? And Mr. Hutchins referred to the dogleg modeling not being used, and that is potentially one of the more relevant modeling that needs to be considered. So I've got these listed if you forget them.
I'll try, and just a bit of background is this application is outside of the Chikai risk area in the current OCP. So it's not subject to those policies. Having said that, we have an interim policy which requires that a bunch of work be done on geohazard assessment within the expanded area that we know is a little larger than the current OCP. So with respect to the moratorium...
Does that expanded area include this property?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's where the moratorium issue, that interim policy makes it very difficult to proceed. You have to perform the geohazard assessment, this debris flow risk. We don't have a tipping point for peer review. It's on a case-by-case basis. With respect to this, I will have to follow up.
Just on that, Mr. Buxton, can you say, was it just not considered for this? Staff didn't see it as necessary for this one?
At this point in time, no, but I'm going to circle back on, I don't know on the group risk. I'll have to follow up on that. What this has raised, and Mr. Hutchinson has a point here that this is what we have to follow up with, is to what degree has the consultant relied on information that's quite selective or particular in terms of the model runs. So we do have to find out from the consultant as to what degree he has or has not. That to me is the critical issue. With respect to whether or not it's information he could or should have used, that's something for the consultants to argue amongst themselves, and it's not our area. Did I catch? Oh, in terms of the flooding hazard, the overland flooding hazard from the river is more significant in this area. We're talking about meters of development, and yes, that is part of the flood assessment that Mr. Chalmers has said will be ongoing. That does cover transference of risk. Now I think I got all, did I catch all of your questions?
You did, and so some of those questions with regard to group risk, the dogleg, the modeling, the peer review, we'll have some of those questions clarified for the next public hearing on this?
Yes, we have some follow-up to do with the consultant to clarify how he's reached his conclusions.
Okay, thank you. And I think you dealt with stormwater already. There was a question about density, and maybe you could clarify what our policy is with regard to moratorium on increased density. I know the answer, but I should let you answer.
I hope I get the right answer. The interim policy allows for limited increases in density, provided that the hazards are assessed. Now, I'm trying to remember the interim policy from memory, and I should have bought a copy. And I can't remember the thresholds at which that interim.
Yeah, I think the question was framed as there's a moratorium on density, and I believe it is that there's a moratorium on increased density if it's not already zoned residential. We're not going to rezone it multifamily residential.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, you're correct.
So you can build to your existing designation under the OCP.
That's correct, yes.
I think you talked about the transfer of risk, and that'll be, now there was a question about the community amenity, and I'm wondering if you could maybe go over what the community amenities, and there was questions about the trail access. I wonder if maybe Asia can speak to that specifically.
Yeah, I believe in the original submission that there was a trail proposed along the BC Hydro right-of-way, and in subsequent iterations that trail has been removed. simply because it didn't connect to or from anywhere. And I believe that's more the question of permeability and connectivity would be brought up for the subdivision application, not necessarily at the rezoning stage.
Yep.
I should add, there is a crown parcel that looks like a road right of way immediately to the east of here that does allow some potential, should the crown allow us to build a trail on it.
I think that's a hydro right away, is it not?
Yeah, I think it's BC Hydro that owns that.
It's an unutilized right away, but it's still a BC Hydro right away, which is always fun. And there was a question or comments around traffic along Judd. Does this project tip any traffic analysis?
No traffic study has been requested or submitted to date, and staff are aligned with the applicant that the 35 units doesn't necessarily warrant a standalone traffic study.
Thank you. Councillor Cryer.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of things. And on the drainage, I mean, sometimes when a development goes in, it makes the drainage in the neighborhood better because it allows other ditches to hook up to a new ditch. Is that going to be the case here?
Through you, I believe that the draft civil plans showed that the drainage would actually run through the remainder property, so through the owner's current property. Feel free to jump in if that's incorrect, but I think that all of the storm on site was going to be routed through there eventually into Judd Slough.
Well, it was just to the people that were concerned about the drainage, you know, like, I kind of think it might make the drainage better. And then
they need to meet our subdivision development control bylaw standards.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing was, maybe if you don't have it tonight, maybe at the next public meeting, could we have a tally of how many developments, how many units we have approved now, and how many are single family? Because I do see a need for single family.
Okay, let's keep it to questions, not
Yeah,
comments.
well, I'd just like to, you know, have that tally, so next time when single family gets brought up, we have a number or a percentage of right now what is being created in the single family and what's being created in the multi.
Thank you. Councillor Chappelle.
Thanks. I'm interested in the information that we have up online. Is it peer-reviewed literature that is on the Chikai Fan refluent and the flood hazard? We have peer-reviewed literature online that's been provided by a proponent. The information that was accessed was online on our site, or?
Yes, there is a model run through the chair. There is a model run. And again, it's one, as was noted, it's one run. So what we need to know, what we need to ask the consultant is, if that's what he's relied on, how he's reached his conclusions. Because that's a very limited set of information on which to base the conclusion. We need to follow up on that, and we will do.
Okay, thank you. But there's other, as far as, is there more peer-reviewed information that we could provide that is available, that is a study of the area, or is that proprietary information?
There are hundreds of reports, many of which have been peer-reviewed. As has been noted, it's one of the most studied fens, and the consultant's quite well respected in this field. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Kent.
So, to Mr. Buxton, just for clarity, before third reading, then we would expect to have that modeling back, which would include overtopping dike, stormwater, but it does not contemplate debris flow from the Chikai because of its location.
No, the flood hazard, the report that we have right now, I think its focus from Mr. Freely is on the geohazard, on the debris flow. Further work needs to be done on the flood modelling. That would be done post the public hearing.
And post third reading, if it's third reading's given. So all the flood modeling would be done prior to adoption. It would be a condition of adoption.
That's what I was looking for, thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands from council. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, come on up and state your name. You've already done that, but just state your name.
So, my name's still Martin Fitchell. I'm confused here. Kristen Gawley mentioned that there's a moratorium on increasing density by changing zoning. And you guys nod yes. So what we're doing here tonight is having a public hearing about changing zoning to increase density. But we've already stated that we're not doing that right now.
I'll get staff to clarify.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
let's be really clear on this, because then
Yeah.
we just end the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, if you want, we'll let Gary have a flash at this, and then you can speak next, Gary.
My memory is not great on this. I can't give you a crystal clear answer on it right now on what exactly that interim densification policy was.
My mind's also not clear. I thought that it was in relation to the flood hazard, not the Chikai fan debris hazard. And because we've advanced the integrated flood hazard management plan to a point where we've brought it to you guys and certain policies have been put in place, we've moved past that. But again, I would want to clarify
We'll
own.
bring that to the next public hearing, a very succinct, clear answer on what our policies are dictating. Yeah, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor Hudson. My name is Cameron Chalmers. Just to clarify the moratorium, when the district initiated and started the work on the integrated flood hazard management plan, there was a blanket moratorium put in place. And through the course of that, there were a number of landowners that worked with staff and with council to see if certain areas could be excluded. And that's what happened with this property. So 2 years ago, as Ms. Gawley mentioned, yes, there was a blanket moratorium. There were public meetings held where that was very clear. That has subsequently been lifted, which has enabled this application to move forward. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit. And just one other comment in respect of the flood hazard versus the debris flow. I think where our consultants went is that there's two hazards here, and we have to deal with the worst one. And the worst one on this particular site, based on his very significant experience, is the flood hazard, not the debris flow hazard. So what happens is that by taking care of the flood hazard, we will have already taken care of the debris flow hazard, because as Mr. Buxton mentioned, this area was outside of the traditional modeling of the fan, which I would note was the knuckle or the elbow breach of the river. So in short, by addressing the flood hazard, we will also be addressing the Chikai hazard is the approach that has been taken. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify, there were sort of two moratoriums, one on the floodplain side of things and one on the debris flow side of things. We did lift the moratorium once we got some new information in integrated flood hazard management plan, and we took the direction that the use couldn't change. However, there could actually be something there as long as it met with the use as designated in the OCP. Is that correct, Mr. Buxton?
Yes, that sounds much more familiar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'm going to ask for a second time. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Please come up and state your name and street address. And you've already done that, so just state your name.
Hi again, I'm Kristen Gully. I just wanted to be clear, there's two definite different things. There's flood and then there's debris. What I'm speaking of with the meeting that I went to, because it was about the Chikai, it was considering the debris flow, and that's what, at that time by staff, I was told there is a moratorium on increased density because of the debris flow. And I understand what you're saying, that if you mitigate for the flood, but I think, and I'm not certain because I'm not an expert either, that it's different mitigation that needs to be done. So I just want to make sure that what you're planning on is right, even though I still don't think it's right because it's still transferring the risk onto the existing properties that are there. So that, I just want to be two different things. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, come on up, state your name and street address. And actually, I'll just hold you there for a second, just see if someone else wants to speak for a second time. Yeah, and then I'll come to you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Don't see anybody, come on up.
Martin Fitchell. So we narrowed it down to the flood hazard the moratorium was lifted in certain specific areas, and we think it was lifted on this property.
It was lifted on this property.
It was. We know it was lifted. We're all nodding? Okay. And just why, what changed? Why is there no longer a flood hazard on this property? When, like I said, I've been there, living there, and it has flooded. The homes there have flooded. So I'm just wondering what specifically has been done to mitigate the flood hazard on this property. And more to the point, why are we building in a floodplain? That's really what it comes down to. We've got lands relating to be developed that are not in hazardous areas, that are not in the debris flow areas, that are not in flood-prone areas. Why are we doing this? Like, that's the real question I'm asking.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to actually do for the next public hearing is have a much more comprehensive integrated flood hazard management approach to this, so we have very clear understanding of the two hazards, where they overlap, how they are applicable, and how our current policies are influencing what can and can't be applied for on these lands. Okay, Mr. Buxton, because I think the whole integrated flood, I don't think we have the staff here to really speak to the integrated flood hazard management plan, which is really the detail you're looking for. Okay. But we'll have that at the next public hearing.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Councilor Pryor.
Yeah, thank you. The fellow just up there did ask a question that we didn't answer, was why are we building in the floodplain? I mean, there is an answer to that. Okay?
There's probably multiple answers to that.
But
yeah.
I mean, I think that should be answered.
Sure, Mr. Buxton?
Why?
Because somebody brought in an application?
Well, we are considering an application.
Okay.
And we have an obligation to consider the application.
That's right. Okay, well, I just thought it should be answered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think his question is, it should factor into your decision making.
Yeah, but still, it's,
Assuming.
thank you for answering that.
Thank you. I will ask for a first time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this public hearing? I will ask for a second time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this public hearing? And I'll ask for a third time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this public hearing? Seeing no one else, I will call this public hearing closed. There will be a second public hearing on this bylaw on Tuesday, July 11th, 6 p.m. at Squamish Senior Center. Thank you, everybody. See you in a couple weeks. Do we need... Yeah, so I'm just going to go to 4.1 here, and I'll just read this out. That this is a proposed motion that second public hearing be held 6 p.m. on July 11th, 2017 at the Squamish Senior Center for District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw, number 2100, 2009, Amendment Bylaw, Waterfront Landing Sub-Area Plan, number 2483, 2016, and District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw, number 2200, 2011, Amendment Bylaw, CD Zone 40, number 2484, 2016. Should we do these separately? Okay, is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Blackman Wolf. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that the second public hearing be held at 6 p.m. on July 11th, 2017 at the Squamish Senior Center for District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw 2200, 2011 Amendment Bylaw 41601 Brennan Road, number 2376, 2015. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to terminate. Seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everybody.